Today's conversation is an absolute banger. Sam Stubbs from Simplicity and I go deep into purpose-based entrepreneurship and why he chose to give his company Simplicity away to a charity from the absolute outset. But of course, all entrepreneurs have their humble beginnings.
I hooked up with this guy called Eddie, who's either a billionaire or in prison right now. I don't know, but it's one or the other. But shit, the guy was an amazing entrepreneur. We'd actually walk in there and say, hey, listen, we're trying to make some phones. Could we have a couple of these transistors? And these guys would just laugh at us, a couple of 10-year-old kids. We would repair these phones, and then we ran this effectively illegal phone extension business. It was $10 if we liked you, $20 if we didn't. I was a typical New Zealander, so I thought that the way is you become a lawyer or you become a doctor or an accountant or whatever, professional trade. So I went down that path. My heart was in Sunnyvale. I wanted to look after the people there. This idea that you all start off equal is bullshit. I think I had 54 interviews. Like, it's so hard getting in, eh?
Changing gears, we start talking about the philosophies of the finance industry and what it means for a country to have access to capital and the rich opportunity that is available in front of New Zealand.
What I'm having a poke at there is the business models, which are, to my mind, overly extractive, overly profitable, and there are a lot of people who are making a hell of a lot of money in the finance industry. But AI is going to smash the finance industry massively because it's like having an independent financial advisor there charging you nothing, telling you the actual truth. However, we do now have an opportunity because there's all these billions of dollars worth of KiwiSaver money. We can make KiwiBank the All Blacks of banking in New Zealand. So New Zealanders will have more money saved than the value of everything that the government and every local government owns. That is the scale of the opportunity we're looking for. We have never been capital rich, savings rich. We've had all of our money in houses, right? And that produces exactly nothing. I firmly believe the next 30 years in New Zealand's history will be the best ever. Here's our business model. We don't make any money. That means we're not worth any money.
Yes.
That means we'll never be bought or sold.
Sam Stubbs, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So you've described yourself as the most hated man in finance.
Yeah.
That's a list of like many contenders in there.
Sure.
So is there like a poll that you run in the industry on an annual basis?
No, there isn't. But like, judging by the number of industry events I get invited to, I'm still firmly number one, right? So,
okay. That's a marker, that's probably a marker of success for you though, isn't it? Not attending these events.
And look, it's never personal. The people in finance are great people like everybody else, right?
Absolutely.
It's just that what I'm having a poke at there is the business models, which are, to my mind, overly extractive, overly profitable, and not really giving value for money. So, of course, when you start saying that, they're pretty unpopular, right? Because there are a lot of people who are making a hell of a lot of money out of the finance industry. So I'm challenging their livelihood, not challenging the people. The people are lovely, but challenging their livelihood and their business models. So that makes me, I wouldn't say, I don't think anyone particularly hates me, but they certainly hate the message. Well, I hope they don't as a person, but they certainly hate the message. Yeah.
Do you think that, so you used the word extractive there, so do you think that the returns based on the capability and the value that is brought by the industry, broadly speaking, is out of whack with where it should or could be?
Oh, massively out of whack. You know, the finance industry is a priesthood. So they dress it up in language, fancy offices, all that sort of stuff to give this impression that, money is scary, money's difficult. So, hire an expert to handle it. Money's really easy. And so they've done a great job of doing. I mean, this is centuries old, this model, right? But it is not good value for money generally. In relatively few examples is it, and we sort of know this because if you have a look at how much money Simplicity makes for its members versus the fees it charges, well, we know that the industry can pretty much run at about a third to a quarter of its current fee revenue. The rest of it is profit, and the marginal profit is massive because the economies of scale from this industry are huge. Because it's just like there's no machines, mate. There's no factories. There's no fixed costs there really, or they're tiny. So and that's just the way that the industry is and the way it's developed. And of course, because it's such a massive pool of money, charging 1% doesn't sound very much.
Yeah.
But, if your rates were 1% of the value of your property, you'd be screaming.
Of course.
So 1% sounds tiny, but of course it's a massive amount of money.
Is that why we collectively, people, put up with this? Because you've been very vocal around the usury that you could possibly call it that goes on in the industry. So do you think that we put up with it because it feels so small?
And people are unintentionally dumb about this, and the industry wants to keep them ignorant about it. You know, I remember one of the first things we lobbied for in change was in a KiwiSaver annual statement to show in dollars and cents what you've paid in fees. Previously, it was just a percentage, and 1% never sounded a lot. Then suddenly people going, holy hell, is that what 1% means? So because in many cases it was thousands of dollars a year, right? Some cases tens of thousands of dollars a year. So, you know, that sort of transparency, transparency in our industry is generally bad for business. And so they try to do as little as possible. And I understand the motivation. Hey, I used to work for Goldman Sachs. I totally understand that motivation, but that doesn't make it right. That's what it is, but it's not right. And it's particularly not right when you're talking about ordinary people's savings. I don't care whether the rich pay whatever fees they want to whomever, right? I care a lot when someone who is struggling to make ends meet is unintentionally paying too much because the supplier of that service is not actually doing the right thing in terms of passing on benefits of scale or really intentionally educating them. Now, the world's going to catch up with this model. I mean, I think everyone is AI everything, right? But AI is going to smash the finance industry massively because as soon as you can find out what's really going on, and as soon as there is an objective agent that is telling you, hey, you know, this is cheaper, this is how you make more money. And of course, the AI suppliers will find a way to monetize it and get sponsors and so on. But fundamentally, it's massively disruptive because it's like having an independent financial advisor there charging you nothing, telling you the actual truth. That is a nightmare for the finance industry. So now it'll take a while to happen. But, you know, I can see in our business now, we have over about 10% of our signups straight from AI engines. People just telling us, what is the best KiwiSaver for me? Cost of distribution, nothing. Advertising cost, nothing. And you'd be amazed where the money's coming from. So, you know, this is an industry which is about to go through a tectonic change, I think.
I'm looking forward to it, along with many others. But you mentioned that the finance industry is a priesthood and that it's because people don't have as much insight about money, what it is, how it works, etc. You've written a book about this. What are a couple of four of the kind of high notes in there that you wish that more people knew about money that they just don't?
Well, I think that, you know, the most important thing is that don't think it's difficult. You know, the messages we get are money is difficult, right? I mean, look, drive along a motorway, have a look at a billboard for a bank. What that billboard is never about the numbers. Every now and again, they might put a mortgage rate up if they have a temporary short-term advantage in a fixed-term mortgage rate. But otherwise, it's happy families jumping into swimming pools, right? The subliminal message behind that is money is difficult. Don't worry about it. Just give it to us, and then you can go swimming with your kids, right? That's the subliminal message, and that has worked for a long time. Hence, my calling it a priesthood. You know, the old days when only the priest could read the Bible in Latin, right? Yes. So the problem with that is it's a lie. So money is not difficult. It's very easy to understand, and the basics of money. Actually, anyone who's managing a household is actually already, in a sense, a financial expert. If you can actually get money in and spend it, and you're making allocation decisions all the time, you're making, you know, marginal risk-adjusted decisions about, do I buy this, do I buy that, is this with it? Most people are financial experts. They just don't realize it. And so when it comes to this thing called saving or investing, somehow the industry tells you, oh, no, you know nothing about this. You give it to us. You know, and look, and there are great advisors and there are people offering great value for money. And I'm not saying the whole industry is terrible. There are some genuinely great people out there giving very good value for money. But as a general rule, that's not true. And it's not true where you have organizations that rely more on their distribution franchise and brand name more than the actual service they're providing. And one of the reasons I poke the banks in this regard is, look, they've been sitting there on these brand franchises for ages. They get to charge, you know, when someone goes into the branch, they say, oh, would you like to see your KiwiSaver balance on your app? Ooh, that sounds a nice idea. Okay, so that's their key competitive advantage, right?
It's pretty flimsy.
How's that looking after their welfare? You know, like you know, so hiding behind brand distribution means, and it also means you do nothing. So look at all the billions of dollars that are getting saved in KiwiSaver now. How much of that money is going to private markets? How much of it is doing exits in private equity for entrepreneurs in New Zealand?
Almost none.
Almost none of it. Why is that? Because they're lazy. You can be lazy when you've got a brand name and a distribution franchise. Why would you be bothered as a fund manager to get into this murky world of private equity takeouts, even though the logic tells you the returns would justify the risk, and so your members would be wealthy? You don't bother, right? So the whole industry becomes lazy behind distribution franchises, charging a fortune, and which is why when you go into your bank branch, I can almost guarantee you they'll ask you about your KiwiSaver, because a 1% fee or whatever they're charging is money for jam. It's a gravy train, right? So, the industry's like this. It is not embracing change and not passing on economies of scale nearly as much as it should. KiwiSaver fees this year will be $1 billion. Yeah, regulatory capital required for that, 0. Fixed costs in providing the service, very, very low. Huge marginal profitability. Eventually these chickens come home to roost. And I think technology and AI is going to smash it eventually.
The financial services industry is incredibly powerful to a degree here in New Zealand, but certainly in the United States. I once heard that there were 6,000 financial services lobbyists in Washington, which is about 3 or 4 times the number of politicians that are there. And so I have a theory, which I'm curious on your thoughts on. So the big change in the finance experience as a consumer over the last couple of 3 years has been not KiwiSaver showing up on your app, but the AML KYC experience that you have to go through to be able to try and move to a different bank, a neobank, which has been incredibly slow to get out of the ground in New Zealand. So my theory is that the banks were behind the creation of that because it serves their purposes, because it makes it the stickiness and the process of moving to a new bank incredibly difficult. And so therefore they want that to be in place, even though it costs them money to be able to have to administer that thing, but it works in their favour because essentially the neobank slowness in getting out into market is very much in their favour. So
you're absolutely bang on. Look, if you you talk about lobbyists, you want to see the bank lobbyists in Wellington. These are people who have parliamentary passes. They get to speak to politicians in the corridor anytime they like, and they are arguably the 4 of the 5 most profitable companies in the country are banks. The Bankers Association does a very good job of slowing things down. I'll give you 2 examples. You're absolutely right on one of them. AML KYC, let's call that open banking.
Hey, it's Josh. Thanks for listening to the show. When founders talk about the dream exit, they're really talking about freedom. Freedom to choose how to use their time and to decide what comes next. I'm a client of JB Ware in New Zealand, and I know this is what sets them apart. They help entrepreneurs and leaders turn success into significance. A great exit isn't just about the commas in your bank account. It's about what those commas enable you to create. 2 Commas is proudly partnered with JB Ware, helping founders by putting their wealth to work for generations.
We're 10 years behind. We've just done it. And that is because it has been absolutely in the bank's interest to delay that as much as possible. And they've played all sorts of games via, and I won't go into the details, but organisations like Payments New Zealand, where they've said, we're the industry, we'll look after this. What they've done is they split themselves so they could never agree. So because they couldn't agree, common standards for payments were never agreed. Open banking never happened. They played a whole lot of obfuscation and delay tactics, which are very hard to understand from the outside. When you're an insider, you know damn well what they're doing. And so net effect of that is, we used to have FPOS. We used to lead the world but now we are an absolute laggard. Like we're tail end Charlie. We've just bought an open banking, and of course everyone thinks that's going to be a revolution in banking. It is not. It is just a facilitator. And you have a very, very well-funded bank lobbyist. And every now and again they pull stunts like threatening to pull out of New Zealand and all that sort of stuff. So look, it's been a masterclass in delay and obfuscation, which has been highly profitable for them. We know this because they net interest margins of banks in New Zealand are world leading, and this is where you do not want to lead the world in profitability. So they are world leading. We know that on average, for the longest time, they've been about 20% more than they have been in Australia in terms of the amount of money they make from a New Zealand client versus an equivalent Australian client. So, New Zealand's a gravy train for the banks. And the politicians, unfortunately, because the language of finance and business and banking is arcane, very few people understand. Very few politicians understand what's going on here. They don't understand the game that's been played. And ministers of finance and ministers of revenue and so on may understand it, but they have, I wouldn't call them held to ransom because that's too strong a word, but they have, the politics of fear that the banks have played about this has been massive because the banking industry is very interesting. It socializes losses and it capitalizes profits. Have a look at it in COVID. What was the first thing the government did with anything to do with money was they made sure the banks weren't going to go bust, right? Yeah. So whenever time is tough, the banks put their hand up and ask for government support. And then when it comes to giving back, oh, no. They're conspicuously silent, right? So look, I understand them, but they're very nice people running these banks. I've got nothing against them personally, but the business model that they're running is massively extractive. It's not my words. Commerce Commission have said there are billions of dollars of excess profit going to Australia every year because of the chokehold the 4 big Aussie banks have got on the New Zealand economy. And the government, who owns KiwiBank, have actually facilitated this. They have kept a one-arm boxer in the ring with 4 heavyweights so that the 4 big banks can say, hey, it's a fair competition. We're competing against a state-owned bank here. No, you're competing against an undercapitalized state-owned bank that is, and the politicians in many ways are responsible for this. Ministers of finance, successive ones, have known damn well that they needed to recapitalize KiwiBank if they were going to make them the big champion they should be. They've never had the public money to do that. They'd much rather spend it on hospitals and schools and so on. They've tried to pay jiggery-pokery with ACC and NZ Super providing them money. And anyway, I won't go into that, but that was a Clayton's response to a major problem. So, however, we do now have an opportunity because there's all these billions of dollars worth of KiwiSaver money, and so we can make KiwiBank the All Blacks of banking in New Zealand. We, like KiwiSaver managers, can fund that via the stock market. We could keep it 100% New Zealand owned and we could smash them. Because the only thing that will get mortgage rates down and deposit rates up in terms of squeezing that margin the banks make is serious competition. I mean, this is not guerrilla warfare. You need full-on balance sheet, smash-you-in-the-face warfare. And that's what the banks do. They are listed on the Aussie Stock Exchange. They have hundreds of billions of dollars of shareholder capital. Okay, let's do it in New Zealand. And we can do this. There's nothing stopping us from doing it. The politicians just have to get out of this. We're not selling the family silver to anyone because in New Zealand, selling anything and first selling it to the offshore people, we can sell it to ourselves now. We've got the dough. I'll give you a really interesting statistic that I came across this week. Actually, our economist did some work. The value of everything the government owns in this country is worth about $600 billion. Forget about the conservation estate for a second, because who knows what a third of New Zealand's land is worth, but everything else is $600 billion. Local governments own about $200 billion worth of assets, water pipes, electricity, all that sort of stuff. By 2070, KiwiSaver should have $1 trillion. So New Zealanders will have more money saved than the value of everything that the government and every local government owns. That is the scale of the opportunity we're looking at now. We've never had that in history. We have never been capital rich, savings rich, or we've had all of our money in houses, right? And that produces exactly nothing.
Zero income.
So we've got this golden opportunity now. And I firmly believe the next 30 years in New Zealand's history will be the best ever if we take advantage of this. What we could do, though, is stuff it up by sending it all offshore, which will get the returns for the KiwiSaver members. That's fine. They'll get the returns. But that means no jobs, no capital for business growth here. And we know that $1 in New Zealand invested by New Zealanders generates twice the GDP over the long term as a foreign dollar, as an offshore dollar, because it sticks around. It's got longer duration. So, we have this massive opportunity for prosperity like we've never seen in our history. Never, ever have we had the money that we're about to have saved by ourselves to invest in our country. But, the finance industry is not going to facilitate this, but the politicians can help mightily by providing opportunities of things to invest in. And that's local body politicians as well. Because think about your KiwiSaver. If I think about public ownership, right, as an idea. Public ownership we've normally thought about owned by the government or owned by the council, right? But if a KiwiSaver fund, if this thing was 100% New Zealand owned by KiwiSaver funds, for example, and iwi and private investors, well, that's public ownership, just by another name. The public own this asset, right? So could KiwiSaver funds own the ferries? Could they own power lines? Could they own water pipes, water meters? Yeah.
No reason why not, right?
No reason, as long as you make sure that you can't sell it to somebody that who's not Kiwis. Now, we could never do that in the past because we never had the money. Now we do. Now we do. So we just have to join the dots, and look, to give you an idea of scale here, like Simplicity is just one KiwiSaver. I mean, we're a big KiwiSaver provider, but we're just one. We decided to take housing seriously, rental housing, long-term rental housing. Well, now we're building 1.3 houses a day. And, we've got, we're the, well, I don't know whether we're the biggest house builder in the country, but we're certainly one of them. And that's all within about 5 years from a standing start. So, the possibilities when you have lots of capital over the long term, the possibilities for change in this country are massive. And that's why I'm very excited about it. I know right now everyone's down in the dumps. I'm actually more optimistic about New Zealand's future now than I've ever been in my lifetime because, I'm right at the coalface. I can see this money coming in. So I'll give you an example. A lot of people don't think about the power of collective savings and investments. So I'll ask you a question. Yesterday, how much money do you think our members gave us just from normal KiwiSaver contributions and investments to invest yesterday?
Simplicity?
Yeah.
So you're a $10 billion-ish
about
fund?
11 and a bit billion.
Yeah. So you probably took something in the region of about, 250,000?
Yeah.
Yep.
16 million.
Yesterday?
Wow. $16 million in our bank account. Now, that's admittedly a big day, but on an average day, we are now getting between $5 and $10 million a day.
Wow, phenomenal.
We have to invest that money, right? That's a working day and so on, but it's a lot of money, right? And so we have to invest that money. So it is so easy to send that money offshore. You can go and buy Microsoft and NVIDIA and Apple shares till the cows come home, right? What would happen if we ended up diverting some of that money into New Zealand, into the things that we use ourselves, the infrastructure we use? The reason that's a great investment, that's a very good investment, because you know the bill you always pay? Your power bill, your water bill, your rent, right? These are very, very stable cash flow. That is a good investment.
Business,
and they're also inflation index linked as well, right?
Yep.
So they're fantastic investments, but they haven't been available. And there hasn't been the money to invest. But imagine if we could do that. Imagine if we could take a portion of that. That means that we are replacing the power lines, replacing the water pipes, building the houses, all these things, and the government doesn't have to pay for it. That means they can spend that money on schools, hospitals, roads, the other stuff where you don't get an economic return because people don't pay their bills on those things, right? Because they're free.
Yes.
Right.
So fundamentally, I really like the idea of this, that the US is the home of privatisation.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not aware of how they handle this kind of, this part of the asset class.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. They've quite famously privatised some of their prisons, and it hasn't been terrifically successful, I understand. That may be a legislation and who's putting people away kind of problem. They've got the most incarcerated population in the world.
And mate, look,
treated poorly.
We're never investing in prisons, but
right.
But you can monumentally stuff this up, as well.
Yeah. So when you go to the States, and you'll be there all the time, I'm there at least annually, I've watched it over the last 25, 30 years just decline, right? Yep. And a lot of that infrastructure assets are just not being cared for. Yeah. Are many of those privatised? And is there a model where this works?
Look, there's some. It's a very mixed model. There's what we've learned, because this has been going on for decades now. We know you can stuff it up. So give a classic example. UK Water, right? The UK sold its water utilities to the French and the Aussies. Good luck with that, man, because they come in here, and what does an Aussie care about the supply of water? They want to make money.
Profit.
They want to make money, right? So if you have short-term, or let's call it non-domestic money invested in your key utilities, it's going to go wrong because the motivations are just too different, right? Yes. But if you have your assets owned by the very consumers that use them, So if they are locally owned by pension funds who have a very long-term view, and actually if you make it very difficult to sell, so for example, we would happily buy any power lines company in the country, and we would give the council who owned it a veto over us selling it. So they would be able to say, no, you can only sell it to someone we approve. So the council keeps control of who owns it. They approve us to own it because we want to own it forever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We'd want to own it forever. So you can do this well or you can do it badly. If you want to maximize the amount of money to get out of the asset on day one and kind of give up caring, which is what happened with UK Water, because suddenly it's someone else's problem. It's
probably the government to bail them out. Right?
Well, because that's what happens, right? Eventually it goes wrong, and the checkbook, government checkbook. But if you get the motivations right, it can be a very successful model. So there are plenty of utilities that are owned by pension funds around the world that run long term. We've set up a company to do this called InfraKiwi, and my aim there is for it to be the biggest and most boring company in the country, right? 100% New Zealand owned, forever, listed on the stock exchange, and it just owns these assets forever and runs them well. And that way you get a fair outcome for all involved. You're not trying to squeeze the lemon to make the most amount of profit in the shortest period of time because you can't sell the asset. You can't jack up the revenue or jack up the profit to sell it to the next person because you can't sell it. You're going to own it forever effectively. It's very difficult to sell. So if you get the motivations right, it works really well because effectively those are the motivations behind public ownership as well. With public ownership, the people who own the asset use the asset and pay for it. So there's a balance there that comes out over time. It becomes politics, right? Yep. So this is just a different form of political ownership. But what it's doing and what's so important about this is it's rechanneling all that money that I would otherwise spend on Apple shares back into New Zealand, providing the infrastructure we use, employing the people, employing our kids and grandkids. And there always needs to be a balance. There's always got to be some role for offshore capital, but goodness, we have this massive opportunity now.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and we're doing it, it's not like I'm just talking theoretically. We're practically doing this now.
Yeah.
Simplicity Living is employing directly or indirectly now, we think about 2,000 people.
Wow. In
the middle of a construction downturn, right? Because the money is just there and we can think long term. That's an example of the possibility. Yeah.
So for the average investor who's a KiwiSaver participant, and this is kind of circling around the things that they don't know that they should know. One of those things is that they're paying too much in fees. That's really clear. Another is that the clarity on how that money is managed is probably it's made to look more complex than it actually is behind the scenes. But what are kind of a couple of other things that you'd wish that they knew, given the position that you hold, the understanding that you've got of the markets, your low fee model, your kind of owned by a charity kind of model, which we'll come back to. But what are the things that you wish that they knew that they don't?
I think I wish they knew how well KiwiSaver has been designed.
Right.
It's a genius of a scheme. Like, you know how they hang out gongs to business people and so on. I actually think that most gongs to business people should be for services to self. But anyway, the person who designed KiwiSaver should have been given a gong, because what's happened is all the money goes to the IRD, and then the IRD sorts out where it goes. And so that means that it's incredibly efficient.
Right.
So, on behalf of our 193,000 members today, we just receive one check from the IRD every day saying, here's all your money, here's where it goes. So it's been brilliantly designed. I could go into more detail, but it would be on the scope of this conversation. But it's the genius design. The other thing is the manager doesn't hold your money. It's held, in our case, all of our money is held by the public trust, in trust.
Ah.
So what people don't realise is KiwiSaver is an incredibly safe place to have your money as well.
Okay.
So it's brilliantly designed. It's extremely efficient. That's why I moan about fees so much, because it's the easiest.
Right.
If you're a fund manager, it is the easiest possible way to run a pension scheme. In terms of the interaction with the IRD, it is very safe because your money is held by a custodian. There's only 3 or 4 of them. They're licensed by the government. No KiwiSaver scheme has gone wrong, and boy, it's regulated so tightly that I would be very surprised if a KiwiSaver scheme ever fell over. And so, we need to be thankful for the genius of the original design. I don't know who it was. It was someone working for Michael Cullen, a bunch of people in Wellington, but boy, did they design a brilliant savings scheme. And I've worked in 5 different countries around the world, looked at pension scheme, different ones, the States, the US, Hong Kong, so on. KiwiSaver is hands down the best. And actually much better than Australia too. Much more cheaper and efficient than Australia. We've done better than the Aussies.
Wow.
So, I'd like people to know that, how utterly cool KiwiSaver is. The second thing is I'd like them to know the power of compounding interest.
Yeah. Einstein called it the 8th wonder of the world, I believe.
Totally. It's unbelievable,
It is.
And so, we're strong advocates for KiwiSaver from birth. And I think the government should be putting in about $10 a week into every kid's KiwiSaver account. That would mean taking away the subsidy that you and I get, but if it was compulsory, we don't need it. And $10 a day, it equates to about $18,000, I think, when they're about 18. If every kid in the country had that, it's a hell of a start in life,
isn't it? It'd solve a lot of the housing problem, ownership problems that we face, and many education investment and many other problems, infrastructure ownership.
You look at a Pacifica family in South Auckland. They had 5 kids, 18,000 each. That's actually a house deposit. So there's it's probably the most significant new policy in my opinion, of any government in the last 30 years has been the instigation of KiwiSaver, and we're just beginning to see
the rewards of it.
Just starting. Most people don't realise it yet, but a lot of people now start looking and say, "Ooh, that's a surprising amount of money."
Yes, so good.
Yeah.
Back to this infrastructure ownership piece with InfraKiwi, which I love, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So imagine that the thing that I think that drives too many people's financial decisions is fear and greed. Yeah. And those are two of the most governing and powerful human emotions. And we often can't name them really clearly.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And so if we look at the obscene run that the hyperscalers and the AI stocks particularly, what is it, 87% of the S&P 500 growth over the last 3 years is just 10 stocks. So the US economy isn't growing. There's 10 companies that are going, absolutely nuts. So we know this. I think the world's woken up to that fact as well. And so the New Zealand stock market, however, has, I think, contracted in value, and certainly the number of listings has decreased over that time.
It has.
And so we don't have a great backdrop and a backstory over the last kind of 10 years or so. And unfortunately, the last few listings that we've had have also been, not abject disasters, but a couple of them have been, kind of pretty close to that sort of territory without naming any names. So how would you package up so that it's the opportunity cost that people would be missing out on of I might miss out on the next 10x in 2 years, such as NVIDIA and many others of those stocks as well. How would you package up the sales pitch to someone for InfraKiwi or for a like company to consider, I'm gonna take that punt, not get the opportunity for 10x? How do you sell that to someone?
Yeah, look, I think, every investment has a role, right? So InfraKiwi is not going to be an NVIDIA or an Apple, a massive growth stock. But you know what? When those companies go through, there'll be another crash. Yep. I've lived through 5 market crashes now. This next one, and it will happen.
I believe so as
well. It will be my 6th,
Yep.
When that happens,
28 is what the kind of, the opinion is.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have no idea. When people have asked me, I say, I have no idea.
Right.
But you're going to be wanting to be invested in someone where people are still paying their power and water bills, right? So the concept of InfraKiwi is not only a really, really long-term investment in New Zealand by New Zealanders, but it's also investing in the last bills you won't pay. Right, or the other way of saying the bills you have to pay, right? Yes. Which means that it will be very, very stable income. So, and this is typically what happens when you have market crashes. What are the stocks that go up? Utilities.
Yes.
Right. So, and that forms part of a diversified portfolio. I would never suggest it's the only thing you own, but it will be highly reliable, inflation-linked income. That's the investment. It's a very simple investment pitch.
Right. It's okay, cool.
Yeah, you pay your power bill, you pay your water bill, you'll benefit from it.
Yep. Plus also there's the thing, and I think we have historically had this in New Zealand. I'm not sure whether it's a current thing, but the Buy New Zealand owned, Buy New Zealand made thing has historically been a strong point of honour for us. I think it's been diluted over the last kind of 10 years or so.
Yeah, I think, Kiwis have lost confidence in their ability to run and manage their own assets. There's this thing about somehow if it comes from overseas, it's always better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, we've been around for a while, Sam, but I'm curious on your thoughts. I'll give you mine in a second. But yeah, I mean, we're an immigrant nation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
And the type and the origins of the immigrant and how well they integrate to the society has a big impact upon what happens in New Zealand.
Yeah.
But we, in the last few years, the press has become quite tabloidy in its nature.
Yeah.
And, it's not the truth that we read, but it's an opinion and it's an angle. My wife, Tina, used to work for the New Zealand Herald. She ran their whole social digital media presence. Yeah. And she was literally just measured on eyeballs per day. Yeah. If it bleeds, it leads. If it leads, people read it. And if they read it, they believe it. That's a belief set of mine.
I get it.
And so it's tabloid-esque in terms of what's being published to the world. And we love to consume bad news. It travels better, faster, because it might present a risk to our livelihood, our ability to put food on the table. And one of the things, my dear old mum, changing gears, but it's related, is that she went through a period of mental health issues. And it was because she was consuming all this news. She had the radio on all day, and it was negative. It was all bad. Some of it's true, some of it's not. But our ability to, kind of filter things out, and, the once a week we'd used to get news, maybe once a day we'd get news historically. Now it's always on, it's always bad, and it seems to be compounding and worse. And so I think all of those things stacked up, a bit of the immigration thing, a bit of the negative news, a bit of the positioning and the filtration of the news that we're getting. Reality, we have been losing a lot of New Zealanders overseas over the last few years. That's slowed down a little bit. I'm glad with the changes to the Australian tax legislation, particularly capital gains, they've moved into a socialist tax level, which is great. Hopefully that might mean great Kiwis will come back to New Zealand.
Maybe.
We've got a youngish couple that's moved in next door. They're Texans.
Oh, yeah.
He's 40, she's 37, 2 young kids. He works in cybersecurity. I say it's the CIA. I reckon he works for still.
Okay.
So high income earner. Exactly the sort of Kiwi we want. So historically we haven't brought in Americans, but they're they had two kids in their school that were abducted in the prior year before coming to New Zealand. There was a school shooting in the neighbourhood district. Not a big one, so it doesn't get to the news. So these things going wrong with the United States. So back to the immigration piece. But that's my view on why it is that the confidence and the love of New Zealand seems to have abated a little bit over the last 10 years. We used to be so staunchly proud. What would you go to change?
On your media thing, I'd temper that a little bit with media have got a sort of perilous business model at the moment. They've been gouged by the big tech companies. Stealing. It's effect I call it stealing their content, repackaging it, and so on. So the media companies have got to do what they need to do in order to survive and thrive. But you're right, the natural predisposition is if it bleeds, it leads in that regard. I've got this sort of interesting, well, I don't think it's interesting necessarily, but an interesting theory about New Zealand, which is that, look, we were colonised by the middle class, right? Which means we're naturally risk averse. The Aussies had a bunch of criminals. And so they had, their risk appetite was massive, right? Which is why they're more aggressive and get stuff done, or a little bit like America. We're a little bit more like England, right? Middle class, which means, batch BMW, boat, that's it. Don't take too many risks. So we don't have a natural cadre of entrepreneurship which is as aggressive as other countries. I think we're great at setting up businesses. It's easy to set up a business here, but the attitude that we want to go and make a fortune and and think in scale is not quite there. The other thing is we're a small country, right? So thinking big is difficult here. And so that means that when you have a more capital-rich environment, you don't have the people necessarily who are ready to take advantage of it, So, and you can see that in the venture capital space in New Zealand right now. The reason used to be you can't really thrive here because there's no money. That's now an excuse. There's a ton of money in venture capital. It's just the idea's not good enough, or you're not, the business model's not right. So New Zealand has to go through. I think that change happens slowly. The opportunity is now we're capital rich, so anyone who wants to do that is probably operating in the best business environment they've ever seen in terms of getting access to money if they're doing really well. I mean, look at how companies like Halter and Crimson and so on are doing. They're accessing, large pools of money. So these things will change slowly, but the preconditions are getting better, not worse, for success in that regard. Likewise for exits as well. It'll become a more exit-rich environment because, look, when there's more money sloshing around, it's just better. Like you've got higher quality problems, right?
Yeah, this show's about exits, so we're going to come to yours in a second. So historically, and I've invested in tech companies for a long time in New Zealand as a angel, typically. 57 investments and had some great returns out of those things, which has been wonderful.
Has it actually worked for you, has it? Yeah?
Phenomenally well. Particularly because of, I think the most important thing in life, investment, this is also true, is timing. So I started doing it 25 years ago.
Yeah, right.
And so I developed capability as we were starting to get into the SaaS boom. And I invested in B2B SaaS particularly. And developed capability, developed a network of people that had access to some good opportunities. We also had a different way of looking at investment opportunities. We pulled together our skills, our assessment, and then our money as well to make a difference. Flying Kiwi Angels is the name of that group. And so, and then also just kind of played the numbers game sufficiently. So my 33rd investment, I've talked about this, was Kami, which is New Zealand's single largest ever angel return in New Zealand, including $40 million back to the government fund, which is amazing.
Wow.
And I was the first, second, third round investor in that. So that one many, many times pays for the entire portfolio many times over. Plus I've had half a dozen others that have had really solid exits as well, you know, from 3 to kind of 15x on the original investment.
Well done, mate.
So it's been great for me. My hypothesis on whether that is the right space for me personally now has dialed back quite markedly. I haven't stopped doing it, but the growth in the SaaS opportunity I don't see as being as present in the future as much as it has been historically. And the thing with angel investing fundamentally is that you place a lot of bets knowing that most of them will fail. You will lose the entirety of that money, not some of it, but all of it, which is so different from investing in infrastructure or investing in large tech stocks, which will tend to have some degree of like security and resiliency about them just sheerly through their scale to an extent. And probably they'll get bailed out in whatever event may happen in the future because of their importance to infrastructure and the economy in the world. But I want to talk about the exit piece a little bit here. So what it meant for New Zealand companies is that you founded the company, you raised money maybe locally, but then you went typically internationally to get very large checks, but also to get access to much bigger markets and the networks that those people would have brought, et cetera. But you then most likely saw an exit that happened internationally, either through PE typically, private equity, or through a trade sale to another operator, a competitor or likewise. And that enabled you, the people in my situation to see maybe 10, maybe even as much as 100 plus return on their money, but then others that came in later on see the requisite return to that investment. Do you see that there's a changing of the guard because we've got this two things? There is a demographic of business ownership which is skewed towards the baby boomer end in New Zealand. So what is it? The over 65 have around about 65% of the wealth. Some of that is contained in business. A lot of that's contained in real estate, rightly or wrongly. It's just a fact at the moment. And so we've also got those that are not necessarily high growth or super attractive businesses for, offshore PE, VC to kind of look at buying as well. So do you think that there's an opportunity for KiwiSaver funds as they grow, as they get towards that $1 trillion infrastructure? Do you think that there's a role they could or should play around investing and buying in more New Zealand businesses as well?
Yes, I do, although I think it'll be difficult for them to do it directly. So I'll give you an example of us, and I don't know whether we're the biggest investor in venture and PE in New Zealand amongst KiwiSaver funds. We're certainly one of them. And if you look at our attitude to that is that when you're managing billions, whatever you do has got to move the needle, right? And it just takes a lot of time and effort, right? This is hard. So an exit which gives you 200% or 2,000% may be cool, but if it's only single-digit millions of dollars in the context of $1 billion portfolio, it's just not worth the effort, right?
Totally.
So I think it will happen if you give it to a third party to be able to do that. So that's why we invest in Icehouse, because effectively it's like getting an index exposure to the industry. They won't pick everything, but they'll pick a lot. And if you believe in capitalism, the risk will get you the reward if you're patient, right? So that's sort of so I think the industry might, but it will do it via independents and agents. Having said that, if you can create a scalable opportunity for us to invest in. So for example, if you came along to our team and said, we want to buy this company, but actually we want to do a roll-up strategy for the whole industry. What we want to buy is 20 companies in this area because there will be 20 people exiting over the next 20 years. And you will commit hundreds of millions of dollars in order to do that, but then you will end up with the massive dominant player in that particular industry. That's a more interesting story.
Yes.
Because that's a capital commitment over a long time, which would move the needle, and someone else is doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, the problem with dealing with pension funds and KiwiSaver funds is just the law of large numbers.
Yeah.
So we are inherently attracted more to opportunities where you can commit a lot of money over a long period of time rather than an extremely attractive percentage return, which is great for an individual, but not necessarily great when you're spreading that over hundreds of thousands. It's a bandwidth issue. Yeah.
Hey, so only once we've mentioned the name of your business, Simplicity, and people love the backstory.
Yeah,
let's go back to the start here, if we could, please, Sam. So you're an Auckland boy. You were born and grew up in Kelston.
Yeah.
So talk us through a couple of those early moments of your entrepreneurial journey that gave you the kind of perspective on the world that you have now.
Yeah. So, look, where I came from, I mean, I chose my parents well, right? They're both teachers and they're amazing. But the environment we grew up in was not wealthy, right? And so the street I was on had a lot of what I'd call, it's poverty, working class poverty. Because back then it was not, we have this romanticized idea of the past, but actually when you were poor back then, life sucked just as much as it does now.
I remember us all being poor was a vivid recollection. I grew up in Papakura.
Exactly.
And so there was really no money that was around anywhere in the 70s and 80s.
So there was a tiny amount of pocket money.
Yes.
Tiny. The rest of it I had to earn, right? Yeah. So necessity is the mother of invention there, right? So I started out, I wouldn't call myself a natural entrepreneur, but for some reason I kind of had an eye for a few angles. So I hooked up with this guy called Eddie, who's either a billionaire or in prison right now. I don't know, but it's one or the other.
Those can both be true, actually.
Yeah, but shit, the guy was an amazing entrepreneur. So we did two things. First of all is we set up a phone repair system. So basically in Henderson back then, the post office used to have these repair shops for phones because back then you could only have one phone.
Yes.
It was a dial phone. Mm-hmm. The government controlled everything. So they used to repair these phones. And we worked out that there was a jumbo bin. We used to go what I call scrounging. We'd go around the industrial estates of West Auckland looking at all these jumbo bins and seeing what was for free on a Saturday afternoon when everything was closed, right? And we found things. I remember one time, and probably shouldn't be telling you this, but we found a huge stack of Playboy magazines once, right? And so we ended up trading those around the school.
I was going to say, to sell them at school?
Yeah, I was basically the pawn king of Kelston boys there for about a couple of months, right?
Heard it here first.
So you just find just crazy stuff like that. So, but we found the jumbo bins of these post office and all these old phones. We thought, oh shit, I wonder if we can like remake them. And back in those days, phones were made of transistors and mechanical parts. There actually weren't computer chips in them. So you could actually, wire the transistors, and Eddie knew how to do this, right? So we'd get all this scroungy bit and we'd take it in, and then we'd be missing some key parts. And because we were 10 and 11-year-old kids, we'd go into and this is where you sort of I learnt don't be afraid of asking because all you can get is no, right? We'd actually walk in there and say, hey, listen, we're trying to make some phones. Could we have a couple of these transistors? And these guys would just laugh at us, a couple of 10-year-old kids saying, could you have, and they'd give it to us, right? So they gave it to us. So then we would repair these phones, and then we ran this effectively illegal phone extension business in Kelston and Sunnyvale, where we would go to a house and we'd say, hey, listen, you can only have one phone, and you could only have it in your kitchen back then. We'll do an extension in your bedroom if you want to. And it was sort of $10 if we liked you, and that was a lot of money back then. $20 if we didn't, and then people we were just doing illegal extensions. So I remember Eddie's house had about 9 phones, ours had about 6. The only problem being that when you dialed those phones, every phone in the house went ding, 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 ding. So we couldn't work out how to, anyway, so there was this cacophony of noise, but you did have an extension, which was posh back then. The next thing was just having a conversation with your mate here is, I used to go to police auctions and I used to buy up stolen cameras, Nikon and Canon cameras, then sell them on trade and exchange, and just make a margin. And so there was this little entrepreneurial thing in me, but I tell you what, mate, I was a working class kid, sort of, with, wonderful parents. But I was a typical New Zealander. So I thought that the way is you become a lawyer or you become a doctor or an accountant or whatever, professional trade. So I went down that path. My entrepreneurial thing got lost. But you never learn, you never forget, I should say, the sort of if you don't ask, you don't get. Just keep an eye on the main chance, and so I guess that served me well in corporate life, and then got to 50, standard midlife crisis, made all the money I needed, wasn't getting satisfaction anymore. My heart was in Sunnyvale. I wanted to look after the people there who hadn't been blessed with my parents, my opportunities. This idea that you all start off equal is bullshit. Some people start 20 paces behind, right?
I agree with that.
So I wanted to go and make life better for them. So hence simplicity. And it's been an incredible journey because it's been an entrepreneurial one, but it's also been a social entrepreneurial one. So we're a very commercial business, right? I want to make our members the most amount of money to give them the most choices and dignity in life. So we are very, very competitive, but with a purpose. And we don't have to make a profit. Everyone else does,
Come back to that in a second. I want to contribute to that starting story because I remember vividly the second extension getting put into our home because my stepdad travelled for business and brought back from Japan a cordless phone that had an aerial on it. It was incredible.
But mate, that's posh.
You could talk next to the pool outside the house. It was incredible, so posh. But we had the techs come from Telecom. This would have been in the mid-'80s, and there was two of them, and they were there for about 45 minutes to install the second box around the house. And they turned a blind eye to the phone wasn't, kind of tally permitted, I think was the expression that we had back in those days.
That little green tick on them,
Yes. We got a bill from Telecom, who was the monopoly, government owned at that stage, and it was $400. In the 1980s. That's about $2,500 in today money. A lot of money. A couple of things happened. My stepdad took absolute umbrage to it. And so took it, he said, I was home. I was like a school teacher only day. I was home and these guys were there for 45 minutes. I really remember them saying, so whose house are we going to go to watch the video? So they billed for the entire day to install this thing that took 45 minutes and they went back to one of their houses. And that was the way they worked. I learned a couple of things. Massive inefficiency in government, and they went through the privatisation not long afterwards. And then my stepdad, who took it to Telecom, who then got the bill, I think credited for this because of the story that he was able to tell about his son who was at home doing this thing. And I learned that you don't, just because the man says something, it doesn't mean you need to listen to the man. So I took a couple of great experiences from that. I want to pick up on something that you did in the middle, though, which is that you worked for Goldman Sachs for a good length of time. First time, maybe the second time you and I met, you said to me, it was the best commercial experience, the best job that you'd ever had. That may be superseded now by simplicity. But I want to know, firstly, what was life in the probably most storied investment bank in the world like? And why was it so great?
So, I was very lucky to get in, So I had some friends in New York and London who made the introductions. And Goldman's a really interesting beast, So from the outside, it seems to be completely mercurial, totally focused on profit, and you would think that in the inside everybody was knifing each other, right? Actually, on the inside, it's the most collegiate environment I've been in, except for simplicity.
Right.
So they really massively valued teamwork, and what they realised was that the power of a well-functioning team. And so, look, it's brutal getting in, man. I think I had 54 interviews. Like, it's so hard getting in, And because what they were doing was checking you out. They didn't care about what you knew. They cared about how were you going to operate as a team player and were you going to, bust your balls for success. And that's a very hard mix, Finding really, really individually, massively motivated people who are prepared to subsume their ego. It's actually a very egoless place too. Really interesting, or surprisingly egoless. If you were not contributing to the success of your team, you were out no matter how much of an ego you had. Now, there are different cultures within an organization like that. We had clients, so client-focused parts of the business would, I think, tend to be more team-focused. If you're a trader, a principal trader, that's a little bit more, they don't care about how you get on the team, they just care what you make, right? So you can't speak for the whole organization, but it was a remarkably humble, hardworking, team-focused environment, and that really was the success of the business. And of course, that creates longevity too, because if you don't have a star culture, then you're not going to be held to ransom by those high performers in quite the same way. So that was a surprising for me. So from the outside, it seems like the many-headed hydra. On the inside, amazing teamwork. And of course, incredible personal experiences. I mean, I've flown around on the Rolling Stones jet and been into their gold bathroom, and all those crazy crazy stuff. What's the other one I had? I was having lunch in the Ritz Hotel a week after, in the same room that Di and Dodie had been the week before they had their dinner, and then she died.
Wow.
Just crazy pinch yourself moments. For a kid from Sunnyvale, I was just like, shit, this is pretty amazing. So, but it taught me the power of teamwork and of finding team players who can operate in a team and love doing that to a common purpose. And that's so really an awful lot of what Simplicity does and how we operate. The culture is actually the culture of Goldman Sachs, which just sounds so weird, eh? The most aggressive entrepreneurial investment bank in the world, arguably the most successful, is suddenly that culture has been transplanted into a not-for-profit, charity-owned social enterprise. But actually, when it's all about getting the very best people and getting the very best teamwork, that works. That works everywhere. And so it was cool fun. I was really pleased I did it. Got to live in London and Hong Kong and spend lots of time in New York. And once again, for a kid from Sunnyvale, it's all just like, it was like bizarre. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for my life.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, and I'm not quite clear on this, I'm guessing you were deal side, not analyst side in the bank. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I was a sort of equity sales
Yes.
and equity capital markets, so listing companies on the stock exchange, doing a lot of that.
Yes.
And I was an Asian specialist, so China, Japan.
Right, as they were going through the boom as well. So really, really great timing to be in there.
Amazing time to be there. Right? Yeah. And particularly with China, I remember. I don't know if you've got time for stories on this, but I'll give you a really interesting example. So we were listing China Mobile, which was the first really big listing of a company on the New York Stock Exchange, and we're in Frankfurt, and we're driving along. I don't know if you've been to Frankfurt, but there's this massive motorway, and everyone drives at 100 miles an hour there. And we were in these big S-Class Mercedes, and they brought so many people because they wanted to do shopping, and a lot of these people have been overseas for the first time, right? So that was where the Rolling Stones jet, it was the only one that could hold the whole entourage, right? Wow. And big S-Class Mercedes come onto the motorway, and we're driving along at 10 o'clock at night, pouring rain in Frankfurt, and I get a call, and it's from the investment banker at the bank, and I'm sitting there with the chairman of China Mobile in the back seat. He doesn't speak a word of English, and he's made a call to a banker in another car, and I get the call from another banker. He says, could you tell that driver to slow down? This guy has never travelled at more than 30 miles an hour in his entire life because there weren't motorways in China at that point, right? He said he's absolutely petrified, right, because he's driving along the middle of the night in the pouring rain at 100 miles an hour. So it's all those sort of like weird experiences like that, and it was Asia then, we were talking about the BRICS countries and the rise of Asia and so on. And so in my lifetime, I've seen the rise of China, and I've seen it in the eyes of the capital and financial markets. It's just a remarkable story. When I was first there to list a company, we had a special ceremony to go and look at the computer, and it had a red, velvet rope all around it, and that was the big thing, to look at the computer. This was a computer that was looking after a toll road, and it was really a big deal back then. Now, of course, it's ridiculous how well they've done.
Do you, if you still have a high level of knowledge about China, what is it that you think that most people have as the major misconceptions about China?
That it's one country. It is geographically a country, but a country that big is just a whole collection of provinces, and they're very different depending on where you go. It has obviously one central government in control, but then they're not as in control as you think, right? It's the provincial governments, and then the city governments, and then the town governments have a tremendous amount of control there. So thinking about China as one country is kind of thinking about America as one country.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yes, yeah, I get that. And I say to hopeful founders or experienced founders that are trying to take their business to the States, my experience share with them always is pick a market. Pick one specific small market, and then try and get a foothold, and then try and dominate in that market, and then expand out from there, because the USA is not one country, man. And they've got different accents, different food, different laws for a reason.
And it's all about people, eh?
Yeah.
And it's the personal connections. So that's the same in China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I fill in the gap. So you then came back to NZ, ran Tower Investments for a period of time, and then you got to the midlife crisis stage. You were planting trees on an island. You were kind of 3 years out in the wilderness. What was the moment that you thought, firstly, there's a two-part question. So did you think that you were going to go and start a purpose-based KiwiSaver investment vehicle? But what was the moment that you're like, this is maybe a shelf life for me. I'm kind of done with this, kind of taking time out and being self-indulgent. What was that moment?
Well, I just got bored, and I buggered my back too, planting native trees. So things, hold on. First of all, I've got this bunch of skills here which might be applied. Could I be a gamekeeper turned poacher in an industry where I knew where the bodies were buried, right? I knew that the fees were too much and so on and so forth. And it was, lining the pockets of too few at the expense of too many. So I kind of knew that, and I fell into it. What really happened was I found a group of people that I could do it with, right? So I made that little kid that went and asked for the transistor from the post office repair shop was the big kid that went and said to a whole lot of people, look, I've got this crazy idea. Would you join me? Andrew, our CIO, laughs. He says, the first question I asked him was, like, how little can I afford to pay you? Like, I'd like you to do this, but how little can I afford? Because I just don't have the money to pay you. So it was getting together. Simplicity is nothing more in a sense than the power of a team. And I happen to be the figurehead, although we have others now. And it's this amazing ability to attract the very best people around a common cause. And now, of course, we have the cash flow to be able to pay people fairly and all that sort of thing. But no one's going to get rich at simplicity, and they know that. But my goodness, they're going to make a difference. And that is happening now. We save. These numbers are approximate, but they're around about. We're saving at least $100,000 a day in fees now for our members. We're giving $10,000 a day to charity. We're building 1.3 houses a day on average. We're planting 500 native trees a day. It's all these sort of things where it's really purposeful. And I think that, I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I love people wanting to get rich, right? That is the heart and soul of capitalism, right? And we only invest in businesses where people want to do that. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to run our business that way ourselves. And so the ability to give people the money to be able to do that is awesome. And then to actually say, but we aren't going to make any more on top of that. We're just going to give nearly all of the benefits of that, less the cost of running our business, the actual cost of running our business. I think our cash profit this year will be $26,000 or something like that. So we'll give all of it back to ordinary New Zealanders who are your brothers, your sisters, your family. You will benefit. So it's a sort of the ability to harness the very, very best of the capitalist entrepreneurial juices and distribute those as widely and fairly as possible and do some good along the way. I've got the best job in the world. It's awesome. Yeah.
Funds management is a relatively well-trodden path to be able to create wealth for those that are at the top and then those that are responsible for running whatever it is that they run. Did you at any stage kind of sit there and go, look, there's one of two paths that I can take here. This can be a for-profit and for Sam and for the people that come along on that journey, or this is a purpose-based only. So did you have that? And I did. I did have that option. How did you make the decision to go down the purpose-based?
Because I'd already been there, right? I've already been on the hedonistic treadmill. I know what it's like to feel rich, and it's what
does it feel like?
Well, it's very seductive for a while, but for me it was boring because I'm a Sunnyvale kid. I know that. Some people can smother themselves in their money, build barriers around, go and play golf, and only hang out with other rich people and feel okay about that. I cannot feel okay about that because I know there are people in Sunnyvale who are struggling. I know that there are people who need someone like me and groups of people like me to help them. And so I feel incredibly privileged to have this. And with that privilege comes responsibility. So I can't numb myself to the responsibility of making my fellow New Zealanders better off. Some people can. And shit, I'm going to sound a little bit judgmental here, and I'm probably delving into dangerous territory here, but I look, I go down to Queenstown and I see these people playing golf and I think, good on you if you're happy doing that. But my goodness, you have such skills, such ability, such talent. Is there a way of helping you feel the way I feel, which is just so much better for actually using your talent, skills, ability, and money to actually make a difference? Now, a lot of those people already are in their own way and they feel that way, and so I'm not judging them, but equally also I think if only they could see what I can see about how good and happy and wonderful life is when you have enough money and you have, where your income is more than your expenses, but then you can use, like if I look at these ex-entrepreneurs, these people who've exited, they are so talented. They're so bloody good at what they do. And I think, look, we have this social problem and that social problem, whatever. If we could apply some of your skills to that, I bet you will feel great about it. I know it. I've been there. And that doesn't diminish your ability to play golf. It doesn't mean you live in a smaller house. It doesn't mean you have to give up a fortune. So, and I kind of feel, I kind of wonder whether a bunch of these billionaires who are sitting on their piles of money and worried about being poor, because that's the interesting thing about hanging around with these people, I can tell you, none of them feel as rich as they want to be.
No, because there's always another go with more
money.
money.
Enough. Yeah. It's never enough, right? So if they could switch that mindset out of that and into, oh my goodness, I know a lot of them would be happier in it. And if any of them want to give me a call, I'll
might have a seat on the board or a business unit to start up or that sort of thing.
Well, I just think that it's the greatest pool of untapped talent in this country are entrepreneurs who have exited, made their pile, and are now looking for something to do. And there are some incredible things to do. And I know this because if you look at Simplicity, we have, I lost count. The last time I counted, we had 67 volunteers. All of them were people like you. All of them. Absolutely aced their game, best in what they do. And I said, look, I'm not going to ask you, the lawyer, to do sausage sizzles, but could you just give me 1 or 2% of your time? And of course, it's amazing how efficient things get done when it's pro bono. 66 people said yes. All of them are still there. The 67th had literally gave me a call 3 months ago and said, I wasn't available then, but I am now. How can I help? And you know the name of this person. He's one of the New Zealand's most famous entrepreneurs. So I like to think of Simplicity as a way whereby people can give back in a really scalable, satisfying way. And it's amazing what you get when you ask. So that little kid who went and asked for the transistor, I now go and ask anybody, could you help us? All they can say is no, and that's fine, and that's fine. But nearly always they say yes, because I believe that all people basically have a good heart. They want a better life for their kids and grandkids. It's just sometimes they don't quite know how, and sometimes sometimes they can't quite find the path, or someone hasn't presented them with an opportunity. So if I think there is one there, I'll do it, and they pretty much all say yes, and it's awesome.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I'll try and draw some insights out from what you've just explained there.
Yeah.
I think that in this modern world of consumerism and observation of others and social platforms and influencers, we have conflated more stuff with more happiness. My own experience is that there's actually an inverse relationship to stuff and happiness, because more stuff means more responsibility, more insurance, more caring, more maintenance, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And having those extra things will not bring you any innate happiness. If we look at social profiling and the tricks to living a good, fulfilled life, it's about quality of relationships and quality of connection that we have with people, finding meaningful challenges to lean into, things that we enjoy solving those meaningful problems, professionally or otherwise, having something to sink your teeth into, and gathering meaning and purpose from being associated with a group of people, being part of a community. And this is the absolute core of it, I believe, is that finding some way to serve that community in a way that brings you that satisfaction from those challenges, but also elevates that community and that group of people. And we're in this kind of, billionaire idolization thing. This whole, they're rich, so they must be better and smarter than me is such a misnomer in the world, which you only get to realize when you get a little bit older and you have the luxury of being able to look reflectively at these things and consider them through the lens of having gotten there to a certain extent. because more zeros don't make you happier.
Mate, you should do this for a living. That's a beautiful summary. I couldn't have said that better myself. I'd only add one thing onto it too, is that when you get really rich and get to be a billionaire, you'd be surprised what people think of you. There's a real mixed set of emotions there. A lot of people actually are pretty disgusted by the way that some of these people live their lives. I don't know. I can sound a bit holier than thou now. I was actually in Turkey last week, right? And I was in a marina because we had some friends and we just hired a boat and did the Kiwi thing, and Turkey's is a Russian money laundering machine, right? You see all these super yachts there, and I look at them now and I think, I do not envy any of you. I could have owned one of those. I don't envy you. And in fact, all I do is see the number of schools that each one of those boats could build. And all I could see is the happiness that you could get from having done that and the satisfaction that you could get from having done that. It's just that you don't know how. You've got into this train of thinking. The problem with getting rich is that you start getting scared. You get scared that people want your money and are only talking to you for your money. So you start hanging around with other rich people. And then you start having a narrative and a conversation which is all about mine's bigger than yours, and you start detaching yourself from society. Then you start having gated communities. Then you start having long driveways where nobody can see how rich you are because you are scared, actually. And that fear is just a terrible motivator in life, eh? But if you flip that round and said, my goodness, the skills, the ability, the resources you have to make that difference, that is the path to, I think, happiness for a lot of these people. Because I would say that, look, you and I know a lot of rich people, I'm sure. I'd say they're a mixed bunch in terms of happiness. I don't think that they're happier or less happy than other people. It's a real mixed bunch.
100%.
But in terms of the capability, in terms of the ability to make a difference, my goodness, and they are well-hearted, good-hearted, well-meaning people. They care about their kids and their family and the environment they live in just as much as anyone else does. They just kind of have forgotten how to use their resources, their ability in a way that would make them happier. So they seem a little bit lost to me sometimes. They give the impression of being very sorted and all this and aspirational, but I'm not actually sure that they've got to a stage in life where they think, what now?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, but and it's simple as, isn't it? The guy who ran a huge chunk of Goldman, who's a mentor of mine, very, very successful guy, very wealthy guy. He's at the end of the day when he was retiring, he said, "Look, just what's that phrase? Someone to love, something to do, and something to live for." Anyway, there was something like that, but it was the real simple stuff, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And you look at people who are dying in hospices. Ask a hospice nurse what everybody says when they die. I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I'd spent more time with my friends. I wish I'd spent more time with people.
Wish I was true to myself.
Yeah, yeah, and people should listen to that. That's probably the most. Your point of maximum wisdom in life is probably just before you die, when you look back and you think, well, what was important? And the messages are very simple and very clear and very consistent in that regard. So, and my journey, for what it's worth, has been recognizing that hopefully well before I die and living that way. And I just get an incredible joy out of seeing our team working and fizzing and people in a common purpose. And the point of maximum joy I've had in the last 6 months is going to one of our housing developments that opened. I got approached by two elderly people who for some reason recognized me, and they said, "You're Sam Stubbs." He said, "I just wanted to let you know we've just rented this apartment and I can sell my house, and I know it's going to be wonderful. I can be here for a long time now, and I can spend the money on going overseas, or I can give money to my grandkids or whatever." And just seeing the joy in their face from having housing security, something as simple as that, just making an ordinary New Zealander's life safer, better, happier. I mean, that's just, it's priceless. So I'm incredibly lucky to be able to experience that at this stage. That is worth more than any boat or any car or any house I've ever owned. And it's pretty special. And hopefully simplicity will attract a whole lot of more people like that to achieve that and make money along the way for our members and invest sensibly and rashly and all that sort of stuff. There's an interesting thing about this, if you don't mind just saying one thing about this, the changing nature of capitalism, and I'm really interested to have this discussion. You're the perfect person to test this theory on. I have this theory that there's an increasing amount of capital chasing ideas, but more and more businesses don't require factories or physical locations, right? So actually what's happening is the opportunity for social entrepreneurial businesses is much higher than it ever was because it needs much less capital. Setting up most tech companies doesn't take a lot of money. It takes a lot of smarts and ability and motivation. So if you look at Apple, for example, let's use an example. Apple has this massive market cap. Apple doesn't build anything.
No, they don't make anything.
It's a design shop. It's an ideas factory.
Yeah, and brand.
Yeah. So will the next Apple actually be a social enterprise? Will you actually go to those kids in Apple who've done really well and say, hey, listen, you've made your pile. Could we set up a competitor now? And what we're going to do is actually do a whole lot of good as well. It doesn't mean you work for free, but it doesn't mean that we make you rich either. So is the opportunity for social entrepreneurial, the social entrepreneurial model like Simplicity, is that really a possibility in the tech industry? Is it really a possibility in modern capitalism where we get, because here's the interesting thing about that. As soon as you don't have to make a profit and you have the same talented people doing the same things, you have a massive competitive advantage because the profit margins on Apple products are massive. So are we actually raising an unnecessary amount of capital to make an unnecessary amount of profit, to charge people an unnecessarily high price for things that can actually be provided much lower cost with much more purpose and much wider? And so I wonder whether or not, and I've really had my eyes open to this with Simplicity, because the last industry you would expect a charitably owned social enterprise to succeed in, and we really are succeeding and growing fast, is the finance industry.
Yes.
But that's because the finance industry doesn't need a single factory.
Yeah.
You don't need a single fixed asset. So
So I think, yes, fundamentally, the answer to that is, so the cost from building a business, particularly in technology these days, has gone from creating IP, from building software, architecting, teams of developers, testing, et cetera, getting it out into market. And the second piece, which is distribution, is where all the cost lies today. Because getting people's attention and getting cut through is harder than it's ever been.
Right.
We used to be bombarded with, they said back when I studied at university, one of the things was marketing. We got about 5,000 messages per day. About 3 years ago, we are around about 15,000 messages per day.
Wow.
Billboards, cell phones, emails, many of them are subconscious to us. I reckon now today it's probably more like 25,000.
Really?
So the cost of getting people's attention, the difficulty of getting people's attention is where most of the money is required.
Okay.
So if you can park that for a second, acknowledge that if there's a way that you can do that on a basis that it appeals to people's innate sense of good somehow or other, and that's when we deal with the second issue, which is that we unfortunately as a society, as a world, have become far more individualistic than we ever used to be. Yeah. And we've emerged from the trees as a species of ape based upon coming together as groups. We called them families, then they became tribes, then they became towns and then cities and so on. And so working collectively was how we managed to stave off the literal or metaphorical wolf from the door. And so the pull that we've got in the world today is towards individualism, success of the individual, wealth creation for the individual. And unfortunately, the thing that sits in behind that is that there's now this massive sense of greed that exists. And we celebrate and idolize the wealthy. And I don't know if the same's true of you, but certainly the folk that I know that are in the decamillionaire, the 100 millionaire plus category, they're ruthless. They didn't get there through being good or nice people and being win-win deal doers. They were often make a buck at someone else's expense and trample over people along the way to make that money. Now, is that universally true? I don't know. From the people that I've met, that's the observation that I've had of those people. They'll screw someone over in business if it means that they will make more money in that deal. But in many, many instances of modern economies, greed is the thing that is now governing people's behaviour. But it's not working for us as a species, as we were talking about earlier on. It's not making us happy to satiate our greed anymore. It's making us actually miserable, right? So is there an opportunity for social enterprise? I had Lisa King on the show just recently. So Eat My Lunch, wonderful social enterprise, doing incredible good. unfortunately, she was lambasted by the press. Someone found a story, said that she wasn't, she was making money. Well, she had to make a living. She's got to feed her family.
Yeah, no, I'm a good friend of Lisa's,
Right, okay, so you know the story, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can reconcile those two things, and I'm not sure quite how we do it, but doing things like this conversation is one of those things, showing people the way, celebrating success of those that are doing greater good, and also paying bills and putting food on the table, because those things are a necessity, right? Then, that's, I guess, the only way that we can, we celebrate those that are doing greater good.
Can I add in sort of two things? First of all, on Lisa, she's doing this AF now. I hope she makes an absolute fortune so that she can then come back and be a social entrepreneur.
Which she will.
I would love to do business with her. She's amazing.
She is.
Set something. The other thing to add in though, and there's such interesting observations. The other thing I'd add in though is that the one other competitive advantage social enterprise have is time. Because if you exist in let's call it a capitalist model, you have to reward your shareholders. So there is always a short duration thinking. How do I make this business as fast as possible, as quick as possible? That inevitably leads to some good decisions, but also some bad decisions, right? The interesting thing I found out about simplicity is, and I use this all the time is our friend. We do not have to do anything in a hurry. We just have to do it right. And so think about that in terms of getting eyeballs and getting attention, right? If we were to set up a for-profit model, how do we get the maximum number of those 25,000 conversations? We actually decided straight away, we didn't have a choice anyway. We didn't have a massive marketing budget. So we said, so how are we going to get cut through? Now, back in those days, people answered the phone. So I phoned the first 10,000 members and just said, hi, it's Sam. I'm the CEO. Welcome. Here's my personal number. People remember that, right? Now people don't answer the phone. Unsolicited phone calls don't get answered. You can't do it that way. But what we did was we said, okay, well, we're just going to do the right thing, and we're going to let people tell each other over the dinner table about it, and we'll just do a sprinkling of branding so that people have become familiar with our brand name. Because when you get, financial services is not like buying a pair of shoes. It's a big deal. It's a big decision. So you need to have brand recognition. You need to feel as if you're dealing with a safe organization. That means you need to see their advertising. So simplicity advertising is nothing other than saying we are big enough and wealthy enough to afford this advertising, therefore you can trust us with your money. That's our subliminal message, right, from advertising. But there's some of that. But when time is your friend, you have a really powerful weapon, because then what you are fundamentally appealing to is the innate good nature of the human being and their ability to understand and process. You can give them time to make the right decision. You are not playing on base animal emotions of fear and greed to get them to change their behaviors. So that's one of the interesting things we've discovered. So if you look at our growth is now in hockey stick mode, like it's really growing fast, but it's taken 10 years of people finding us about us, checking us out, and our marketing budget is a fraction of our competitors because it's word of mouth, right? That's trust is hard earned, but so trust and time can be your friends. That's why I actually think social entrepreneurial models, if they don't require a lot of capital, may actually be massively disruptive. And it gets right back to what we're talking about with AI beforehand. AI, if nothing else, might be, it might not be, but it might be an engine of truth. You might actually be finding out the truth from one of these agents. If you are, well, the truth is our friend. The truth is our friend. It is not the friend of our competitors. Ignorance is their friend. So maybe this will be very disruptive. Now, look, I'm a hardball capitalist here, right? I believe in capitalism. It's as Churchill said,
one must, right?
As Churchill said, it's the worst form of economic organisation except for all the others, right? So it's the best of the bunch. But capitalism doesn't mean that it has to be for profit. You can have a capitalist mindset. You can have an entrepreneurial mindset with in our case, just a more distributive idea of where the money goes. So capitalism doesn't mean a few people make a lot of money. Capitalism means a lot of money gets made. It's just how it gets distributed. Social enterprise is a way of distributing that more widely. And big, as I've discovered, and I've discovered this, I didn't know this beforehand, but I've discovered it is incredibly powerful when you go in and try and do a deal and say, hey, listen, we're owned by a charity. It is incredibly powerful to say, you know what, we're going to be around forever. we have a business model, basically. Here's our business model. We don't make any money. That means we're not worth any money.
Yes.
That means we'll never be bought or sold.
Well, you can't be as a charity, right?
Well, and we're worth nothing.
Yes.
So we will never be sold. So we will be around forever. So when you're going to go and buy an asset that's going to be around forever, when you're looking after people's money for their lifetime and their children and grandchildren, we say, well, we're going to be here forever. I employ people and I say, we'd like this to be your last job. And we'd like your kids and grandkids to be working for us as well. That's a kind of a weird thing we say, right?
If you're a founder, then an exit is on your horizon somewhere, either by default or by design. I'd encourage you it should be much more the latter. Why not head to my website and do my exit audit? It'll take 2 minutes and it will highlight for you the things that will maximize your valuation, or indeed those that could cost you millions of dollars. joshcomrie.com. It'll be the first thing that'll pop up. Could be the best 2 minutes that you spend this year.
So these things end up being actually quite powerful commercial differentiators, and I've been surprised by that. But and coming back to your idea about forming tribes and communities and so on, I agree with you that greed has taken over. But equally also, when you find a way to appeal to that, when you say this is good for the community, good for your tribe, good, and as well as good for you, people's better angels are still there. And if you can find a way that triggers there, this is going to be good for me, but also good for all the people around me, it's a real differentiator. So I totally hear you about how we've been consumed into this world of consumerism, greed, short-term, and fear. I believe fundamentally fear driven. But I'm much more of an optimist now, having worked at Simplicity. We've been doing it for a decade now. Seeing how appealing to people's better angels. And this is from billionaires who support us in many ways, all the way down to someone who is suffering and struggling and says, you've given me a warm roof over my head and I'm safe now. It's super powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
And super satisfying. My goodness, am I grateful for my life. So lucky. Yeah.
Couple of parting questions for you, Sam. So you distribute a lot of money to charities.
Yes, we do, yeah.
How, if someone's listening to the show and they're in the position of going, I should do more, I'd like to do more, what's the mental model that you use on selecting an appropriate source for donations? Yeah,
sure. So, look, we have a group of the wise, our trustees, who are of the charity, and so they help. It is aided and abetted massively by member surveys we give, where would you like to give your money? And they consistently give us the same answer they have for 10 years about where they'd like their money to go.
SPCA, Children's Hospital.
Yeah, well, it's basically looking at, in our case, it's that we give them a whole list. They really value, let's call it children in need.
Yeah.
They really value homelessness and food security. They really value the environment. And also they really value, let's call it kids' pathways to adulthood, giving them a chance. So we have 3 strategic focuses. We call it sort of food, forests, and futures. So,
I love it.
You know, and so people can contact us if it's in that area, and we, our members get to give away a lot of money at Christmas every year as well, where they have a poll, and that goes to the SPCA and Women's Refuge and all those places where you would, where you get, it resonates with people. But that's very satisfying. Yeah, no, I sort of, I want us to be the biggest charity in the country one day. But we're getting there, we'll give away almost 4 million this year, and I think we've given away about almost 13 million since we've started so far. So we're getting there.
Incredible.
It's growing it's 10 grand a day now and growing as we grow.
Historically, in my first business, I'd give away a decent sum of money every year to a charity.
Awesome.
And I would ask our community, which was about 4,000 people, of which charities we should give the money to for a couple of years. Yeah. And it was exactly the charities
we've talked
to. It was the top 10, the rockstar charities is what they get known as in the scene.
Yeah.
What I ended up doing was doing a thing called the Unsung Hero Charity.
Yep.
And I got the people involved with those charities to do a video submission, and then we'd share those out with the world. Yeah. And we came across some weird, wonderful, amazing different charities. We're the most charitied nation in the world in terms of per capita number of charities, which is both a good and a bad thing. It shows that we have a desire to help and to set something up. It also means that we've got 9 charities that support breast cancer. The smart thing to do would be for them to get together and have the ability to consolidate and then have some influence and then,
Do you know we're one of the most stingy countries in terms of corporate giving?
I didn't.
Yeah. So that's one thing I'm going to get on with in the next few years is that Simplicity now owns a chunk of most of the big companies in New Zealand listed. I think those companies should be giving 1% of their profits to charity, just as a normal. That should be the benchmark, and hopefully with InfraKiwi, if it gets listed, we'll set the example there. But I think that a lot of corporates in New Zealand are they're taking advantage of the fact that we're individually so generous.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've dropped in the World Giving Index. We were
really?
number 3.
Yeah, okay.
We've dropped down to number 9 over the last couple of years. As you know, I endeavoured to set up a charity, which was another startup about 3 years ago. Yeah. In a recessionary backdrop, that wasn't the best idea, as it turns out. And so we looked at the giving numbers, and we have, unfortunately, and part of that's economically driven, but a part of that is just the changing mindset around, I'll look after me first, then I'll give some money away. And I've seen that in my entrepreneurial friends, actually, as people that are actually doing pretty well, a couple of homes, kind of doing well. And they are going, I'm just looking at how I might get more involved or, in the future. And I'm like, the future is now, my man. This is the moment. Because as Tony Robbins says, if you've got, $10, giving away $1 is hard. But if you've got $1 million and you decide to start giving away $100,000 when you haven't done it before, that's a big sum of money. So as you grow your base and your income, the idea is to continue to grow your giving, right?
Yeah, I get it. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why aren't you working for Simplicity, mate? Like you sound like
I haven't been offered a job.
You're perfectly aligned. I love your values, love your energy, and all that sort of stuff.
Got a lot of alignment, Sam.
All right,
maybe we should have a chat.
Oh well, let's put a place marker in there because this has got to happen some way, mate.
Okay, let's have a chat.
Right, good on you.
Sam Stubbs, I've got a parting question for you.
Yeah, sure.
It's the alternate universe. There's another Sam Stubbs. He found a deeply satisfying career that wasn't in the funds management, social giving space, for purpose, make a profit kind of thing.
Yeah.
What is that career? What would you be doing?
Can I give you 2 choices?
Yes, you can.
Bizarrely enough, one of it would be being an interior designer. I just love interior design.
Your office is really cool. Did you have much of a hand in designing that?
Yeah, quite a bit in that. So I love interior design. But to be honest with you, if I could really do it all again, I would probably be working for an organisation like Médecins Sans Frontières. I'd be right at the front line. Do you know that they basically provide hospital services in battlefield situations?
Wow.
So they're kind of like, they go where the Red Cross won't. And or can't, and so I'd be sitting. I got this idea from a medical checkup I was having at Goldman on Harley Street in London. This guy spent 6 months of each year earning the money, so for the next 6 months he could be a battlefield surgeon. And so he was right at the front line, and he actually almost talked me into giving up my job to be the logistics person. He said, when we go in there, we need someone to set up the camps, get a water supply, get a power supply, actually create a mobile hospital within days, and then have to pack it up within days if the battlefield got too close. And he was working in Somalia, Sudan, Bosnia at that stage. And, and I just thought, oh my God, I mean, talk about an adrenaline-filled life, but and basically, patching up civilians who got just wounded. And so it would probably be doing something like that. Well, what a radically different life, but that sort of occurred to me as being a very worthy existence. How you'd make money, how you'd have a family, I have no idea. But it really real appeal to me. So, and the closer I get, as I get older, the more and more I get towards the giving side of life. The happier and happier I am. And that's at a very personal level with my kids and my family, but also my Simplicity family, but also with society as well. There is just so much more soulful nourishment that comes from giving. It's always better to give than receive. These are simple truisms, and they're true. And that's been a lovely part of my life, has been discovering that somewhat late in life, but I'm very glad I have. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal story, an amazing journey, And if people have liked the message that they've heard today from you, LinkedIn is the place that I know you to share a lot of these kind of sentiments. Sam Stubbs, just follow Sam. Is there any other method that people could keep in touch or follow you?
Just get in touch with me, sam.stubbs@simplicity.kiwi. I'm always interested in meeting interesting people. Yeah. And if you feel like giving and contributing and wanting to make a difference and don't know how or think you might know how and so on, just give me a call. A joyous part of my life is meeting fascinating people with great stories, and pretty much, a whole bunch of them have ended up working for or with Simplicity, and it's just been fabulous. Yeah.
Beware, if you send Sam an email, he might ask you to do a bunch of pro bono work. This is the second time he's asked me, so
I will not, and I'll be shameless in that.
Yes, you are, and you should be, given your philosophy. So,
yeah, sure.
Sam, I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to come on and share your story.
I love this chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me along. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for doing the work that you're doing as well. So I look forward to following the journey.
It doesn't feel like work, mate, but it's just a joy. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks so much for listening to the show. If you've gotten this far, I reckon you've probably enjoyed it. And there's more available for you in the form of my book, 2 Commas. It's available on my website, joshcomrie.com. I've done an Audible version, which is on amazon.com, and there's a Kindle one kicking around on either of those resources as well. I've had some wonderful, unsolicited feedback from early readers. They describe it as being punchy, clear, helpful, and actionable. What it's not is a guide on how to sell your company. You can go to ChatGPT for that. It's more insightful, experiential-based, and a bit of a blend of psychology, philosophy, and what it takes to build something meaningful, and what all that means afterwards. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you grab yourself a copy.